The wind cut through the abandoned warehouse like a knife. Tejo pulled his blanket tighter around his shoulders and watched his breath turn to fog in the freezing air. Outside, snow fell in thick sheets covering the broken streets of the industrial district. The factory smokestacks that once filled the sky with smoke now stood silent and empty, monuments to better days that would never return. Tejo was 34 years old, but he looked older. The streets did that to a person. 2 years of sleeping in the cold, eating whatever he could find and trying to stay invisible had carved lines into his face. His clothes were layered and patched, held together with wire and hope. But he had one good thing, one treasure that kept him alive through the brutal winters. His blanket was military-grade, thick and warm, salvaged from a surplus store dumpster 3 years ago. Without it, he would have frozen to death long ago. He thought about his daughter sometimes, especially on nights like this. Her name had been Sumi, and she had died when she was only 7 years old. The sickness came fast, and the treatments were expensive. Tejo had sold everything he owned, borrowed money from everyone he knew, and worked 3 jobs. It was not enough. When Sumi died, the debt remained. He lost his apartment, then his jobs, and finally ended up here in the ruins of the old industrial zone where nobody came anymore. The cold was getting worse. Tejo stood up and stamped his feet, trying to keep the blood moving. The weather report on the old broken television in the warehouse lobby had said this would be the coldest night in 50 years. He believed it. His fingers were already numb despite his gloves, which were really just socks with holes cut for thumbs. He was thinking about finding some cardboard to add extra insulation when he heard the sound. It was faint at first, almost lost in the howling wind. A crying sound, high-pitched and desperate. Tejo froze and listened carefully. There it was again. Someone was outside in this weather, and they sounded young. Every instinct told him to stay inside where it was slightly warmer. Going out in this cold could kill him. But the crying continued, and Tejo found his feet moving toward the door before his brain could argue. He had lost his daughter. He could not ignore a child in trouble even if it cost him everything. The snow was knee-deep outside. Tejo trudged through it, following the sound toward the old canal. The crying was louder now, mixed with strange clicking noises he did not recognize. He rounded the corner of a collapsed building and stopped dead. Sitting in the snow was a child, but not a human child. The creature was small, maybe 3 feet tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. Large dark eyes, bigger than any human eyes, stared up at him with terror and pain. The child wore some kind of torn suit that looked like it was meant for space, but it was ripped and useless against the cold. The creature's small body shook violently with shivers. For a moment, Tejo just stared. Everyone knew aliens existed now. Earth had made contact with dozens of species over the past 30 years. But seeing one here now in the ruins of his city was shocking. The child made the clicking sound again, and Tejo realized it was trying to speak. Tears or something like tears ran down the blue face. The cold bit at Tejo's exposed skin, snapping him out of his shock. This was a child. Alien or not, this was a child freezing to death in the snow. He moved forward slowly, not wanting to scare the small creature. He held out his hands to show he meant no harm. The alien child flinched but did not run. Maybe it was too cold to run. Maybe it understood that Tejo was trying to help. He knelt down in the snow beside the child and saw that the small body was covered in frost. The creature had been out here for a while, probably hours. Much longer, and it would die. Tejo did not think about what came next. He simply acted. He unwrapped the blanket from around his shoulders and wrapped it around the alien child instead. The blanket was huge on the small body, covering it completely. The child clutched the warm fabric with small 3-fingered hands and made a sound that might have been gratitude. But Tejo knew the blanket was not enough. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of bread, the last of his food for the day. He had been saving it for morning, but the child needed it more. He offered it, and the small creature took it carefully, nibbling at it with small, sharp teeth. The wind howled louder. Tejo realized he was already shaking with cold. Without his blanket, the temperature would kill him in hours. But he could not take it back from the child. He would not. Instead, he sat down in the snow next to the small alien and put his arm around the blanket-wrapped bundle, sharing what little body heat he had left. The alien child leaned against him, still shaking but warming slowly. Tejo felt his own body growing colder. His fingers were beyond numb now. His face felt like ice, but he kept his arm around the child and watched the snow fall. He thought about Sumi again. He had not been able to save her. Maybe he could save this one. Time passed strangely. Taiho drifted in and out of consciousness. At some point, he realized the child had stopped shaking and was breathing more evenly. Good. That was good. His own breathing was slower now, his body shutting down from the cold. He did not feel afraid. He had been alone for so long. Maybe this was okay. He felt something warm on his hand. The alien child had reached out from under the blanket and was touching his frozen fingers with its small hand. There was something on the child's wrist, a device that glowed with strange symbols. The light was pretty, Taiho thought dimly. Like stars. The child made clicking sounds, urgent and fast. The device glowed brighter. Then suddenly there was a flash of light and the child was gone. Vanished. Taiho blinked slowly at the empty space where the creature had been. His blanket lay in the snow, still warm. He must be hallucinating, he thought. The cold did that sometimes. He tried to stand, but his legs would not work. He fell forward into the snow. It was soft, almost comfortable. He could sleep here for a while. Just a short rest. He closed his eyes. Darkness took him, and he knew nothing more. Taiho woke up confused and aching. He was lying on the old mattress in his warehouse hideout, covered with his blanket. The same blanket he had given to the alien child. He sat up slowly, his body protesting every movement. His head pounded and his fingers and toes burned with the pain of returning circulation. How had he gotten here? The last thing he remembered was falling in the snow near the canal. He looked at the blanket in confusion. Had he dreamed the whole thing? The alien child, the freezing night, giving away his only protection. It had felt so real. But here he was, alive and back in his spot. Someone must have found him and brought him back. Maybe another homeless person. It happened sometimes. People in the ruins looked out for each other when they could. Taiho stood on shaky legs and walked to the broken window. The sun was high in the sky. It was past noon. He had lost almost a whole day. His stomach growled with hunger. He needed to find food soon. He wrapped the blanket around himself and was about to head out when he heard the sound. It started as a low rumble that made the warehouse walls shake. Taiho grabbed the window frame for balance as dust fell from the ceiling. Outside, people were shouting. The rumble grew louder, deeper, until it felt like the earth itself was shaking. Taiho looked out the window and his jaw dropped. The sky was turning dark. But it was not clouds. 3 massive ships were descending through the atmosphere, blocking out the sun. They were bigger than anything Taiho had ever seen. Bigger than buildings. Bigger than the old factory complex. Their hulls were dark metal covered in strange symbols that glowed blue. Engine ports along their sides blazed with light as they slowed their descent. People were running in the streets below. Some screamed. Others stood frozen, staring up at the impossible sight. Taiho heard sirens in the distance. Police, military, probably everyone with a uniform was heading this way. The ship settled into a hover about 200 feet above the industrial district, directly over the area where Taiho had found the alien child. For several minutes, nothing happened. The ships just hung there, silent and ominous. Taiho could see military helicopters circling at a distance, not daring to come closer. News drones zipped through the air, broadcasting everything. Then the ships opened. Portals of light appeared on the underside of each vessel. From these portals, figures began to descend. They fell slowly, controlled, landing in the snow-covered streets with barely a sound. Taiho counted them as they landed. 10, 20, 50, 100. They kept coming. 200, 250. Finally, exactly 300 figures stood in formation in the ruins below. They were tall, easily 7 feet, wearing armor that looked both advanced and ceremonial. The armor was the same blue-black as the ship's, with intricate patterns etched into the metal. Each soldier carried a weapon that looked like a cross between a rifle and a spear, with a glowing blade on one end. Their helmets had dark visors that hid their faces. The soldiers stood perfectly still for a moment, then as one, they began to move. They spread out in organized groups, moving through the streets with military precision. Taiho watched as they went door to door, scanning buildings with handheld devices. They were searching for something. Or someone. Police cars arrived and officers tried to set up barricades. The aliens ignored them completely, walking past the barriers as if they did not exist. When one officer tried to physically stop them, a soldier simply held up one hand. A field of blue light appeared, gently pushing the officer aside without hurting him. The message was clear. They would not be stopped, but they did not want to fight. Tejo realized he should hide. Whatever these aliens wanted, it could not be good. He moved away from the window and tried to find a hiding spot in the warehouse. He squeezed behind some old crates in the corner, making himself as small as possible. His heart pounded in his chest. Through the gaps in the crates, he could see the warehouse entrance. He did not have to wait long. The door, which had been barely hanging on its hinges, simply fell inward. 6 soldiers entered, their visors sweeping the space. Their devices beeped and flashed. One of them pointed directly at Tejo's hiding spot. He pressed himself further back, but it was useless. They had found him. The soldiers approached slowly. Tejo tried to run, scrambling out from behind the crates and heading for a back exit. But more soldiers were there, blocking his escape. He was surrounded. He raised his hands, terrified, expecting weapons to be pointed at him. But nothing happened. Instead, the soldiers parted, creating a path. Through this path walked another figure, different from the others. This one was clearly the leader. The armor was more ornate, marked with symbols of rank. The soldier was tall like the others, but moved with the confidence of command. She stopped in front of Tejo. Then she did something that shocked him completely. She reached up and removed her helmet. The face underneath was humanoid, but clearly alien. The skin was pale blue, the eyes large and dark. The features were sharp and elegant. This was the same species as the child from last night. The soldier was female, with scars on her face that spoke of many battles. But her eyes were kind as she looked at Tejo. She knelt down in front of him. Then she bowed, pressing her forehead to the dirty warehouse floor. All around the warehouse, the other soldiers did the same. 300 soldiers kneeling and bowing to a homeless man. Tejo stood frozen, not understanding what was happening. The leader raised her head and touched a device on her wrist. A small hologram appeared in the air, showing the alien child from last night. The child was safe, clean, wearing proper clothes. She waved at the hologram and smiled. The soldier spoke, and the device translated her words into Korean. Her voice was deep and formal. "I am Commander Darim of the Velhari Dominion Royal Guard. You saved Crown Princess Narai. You gave everything you possessed to protect her when you had nothing for yourself. We have come to honor this debt." Tejo's mind spun. Crown Princess? The small creature he had found dying in the snow was royalty? He had given his blanket to an alien princess? He tried to speak, but no words came out. This had to be a dream, a hallucination from the cold, but it was not. Commander Darim stood and gestured to her soldiers. They formed up around Tejo, not threateningly but protectively. "You will come with us," Darim said gently. "We will treat your injuries and explain everything. You are a hero, Tejo. You will be honored as such." How did she know his name? Tejo wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but his voice still would not work. The soldiers began to escort him toward the door. Outside, he could see crowds gathering, held back by more Velhari soldiers. News drones swarmed overhead. Cameras flashed. Everyone was watching. As they walked him to a waiting transport vehicle, Tejo finally found his voice. "I don't understand," he said weakly. She was cold. She needed help. Commander Darim looked at him with something like wonder in her eyes. "Yes," she said softly. "You helped because it was right. Not for reward, not for recognition. This is why you are worthy of our highest honor." The transport rose into the air, carrying Tejo toward the massive ships above. Below, the world watched and wondered. The homeless man who had nothing had somehow changed everything. The interior of the Velhari ship was unlike anything Tejo had ever seen. Smooth walls glowed with soft blue light. The corridors were wide and tall, built for the 7-foot soldiers who moved through them with quiet efficiency. Tejo was led gently through the ship, still surrounded by guards who treated him with more respect than he had received in years. They brought him to a medical bay. Doctors, also Velhari but wearing white robes instead of armor, bowed to him before beginning their examination. Everything they did, they explained first. They asked permission before touching him. They showed him the scanning devices before using them. Tejo had not been to a doctor in over 3 years. He had forgotten what proper medical care felt like. The doctors worked quickly but carefully. They treated his frostbite, gave him medicine for malnutrition, and healed several old injuries he had learned to live with. They offered him food, real food, warm and plentiful. Tejo ate slowly, his shrunken stomach unable to handle much at once. But it was the best meal he had eaten in forever. Commander Darum stayed nearby, watching over everything. When the doctors finished, she approached him with a tablet device. "Do you remember last night?" she asked. Taiho nodded. "The child? In the snow. I thought I dreamed it. It was real," Darum said. She touched the tablet and images appeared in the air above it. The first image showed the alien child, Princess Nareye, standing in a beautiful room wearing royal clothes. She was smiling and healthy. "She is safe because of you." The next images showed what had happened. A ship attacked in space, an escape pod launching, the pod crashing on Earth in the middle of the storm, the princess injured and alone, wandering through the snow until her suit failed, then Taiho, appearing like a guardian angel, wrapping her in his blanket and keeping her alive through the coldest night of the year. "Her tracking device activated when you saved her," Darim explained. "It sent us her location and vital signs. We came as fast as we could, but it took time to reach Earth. When we arrived, she told us everything. How you gave her your only protection, how you shared your last food, how you held her until she was warm again even though it was killing you." Darim's eyes were intense as she looked at Taiho. "Do you understand what you did? You had nothing. You were dying, and you gave everything to save a stranger, a creature you did not even know was royalty. You expected nothing in return." Taiho felt uncomfortable with the attention. "She was a child," he said quietly. "She was scared and cold. What else could I do?" Darum smiled sadly. "Most beings would have done nothing, or they would have helped expecting reward, but you helped simply because it was right." She stood and gestured for him to follow. "Come. Someone wants to see you." They walked through more corridors until they reached a large room with windows showing the city below. And there, standing by the window, was Princess Nareye. She turned when they entered and her large dark eyes went wide. She ran across the room and stopped in front of Taiho, suddenly shy. She spoke in her clicking language, and a device around her neck translated. "You are Taiho. You saved Nareye." Her voice was high and young. She had learned some Korean and she tried to use it. "Thank you. You gave blanket. You are a good person." Taiho knelt down to be at her level. "I am glad you are safe," he said honestly. Up close, he could see she was just a child, maybe 6 or 7 in human years. She had been so scared in the snow. Now she was bright and happy. Nareye reached out and touched his hand gently. "You were cold. You gave blanket to Nareye. Why?" It was the same question Darum had asked. Taiho thought about it. "Because you needed it more than I did," he said simply. Nareye looked at him for a long moment, then she hugged him. Her small arms wrapped around his neck and she made a happy clicking sound. Taiho patted her back awkwardly, not used to being hugged. It made him think of Sumi, and his eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. Commander Darum cleared her throat gently. "Taiho, I must explain our customs to you.
In Velhari culture, a life debt is sacred.
When someone saves a life, especially at great cost to themselves, that debt can never truly be repaid. We spend our lives trying to honor it." She walked to the window and looked out at the city. "You saved our crown princess. You are now bound to our royal family by the highest debt of honor. We wish to reward you. Wealth, a home on our world, position, status, anything you desire. Name it and it is yours." Taiho stood up slowly, still holding Naraye's small hand. The idea of wealth, of comfort, of never being cold or hungry again was tempting. But he thought about who he had been before, when he had a home and a job and a daughter. Those things had not made him happy, and when he lost them, he found he could survive with almost nothing. "I do not want those things," he said quietly. "I helped because it needed to be done, not for reward. Please, I just want to go back to my life." The silence in the room was complete. Darum turned to look at him with an expression of shock. Even little Nareye looked surprised, her head tilted in confusion. Finally, Darim spoke. "You refuse? All of it?" "Yes," Taiho said. "I am not a hero. I am just a man who did what anyone should do." Darum walked closer to him, studying his face. "Do you know," she said slowly, "that makes you even more worthy? Most beings would take everything offered, but you expect nothing. This is pure altruism. This is true nobility." She pulled out a small device and spoke into it in her own language. A moment later, the 300 soldiers who had come to find Taiho entered the room. They filled the space, standing in perfect formation. Darim turned to address them. "This human, Taiho, has refused all reward for saving our princess," she announced. He wishes only to return to his simple life. This proves his heart is pure. By the old laws, by the sacred codes, I declare him guardian of the blood. He is now family to the royal house. His life is ours to protect. As one, all 300 soldiers placed their fists over their hearts and bowed. They spoke in unison, a phrase in their language that the translator rendered as, "We guard the guardian. We honor the honored. His life is ours." Taiho looked around in confusion. "What does that mean?" Darim smiled. "It means whether you want it or not, you are now under the protection of the Velhari Dominion. These 300 soldiers have just sworn a personal oath to guard you for the rest of your life. We will not force you to leave Earth. We will not force you to accept titles or wealth, but we will ensure you are safe, fed, and cared for. This is not negotiable." Princess Nare tugged on his hand. "You are family now," she said happily. "Nare's uncle. Uncle Taiho." Taiho looked down at the small princess, then at the soldiers surrounding him, then at Commander Darim. His life had been so simple yesterday. Cold, hard, but simple. Now he was apparently part of an alien royal family with 300 bodyguards. It was absurd. It was overwhelming. But when he looked at Narai's happy face, at how alive she was when she had been so close to death, he could not regret what he had done. "I do not understand your customs," he said to Darim, "but I will try." "That is all we ask," Darim replied. She gestured to the windows. Outside, news drones still swarmed around the ships. "Your world will want answers. Are you ready to face them?" Taiho thought about the attention, the cameras, the questions. He thought about his quiet life in the warehouse ruins. That life was gone now, burned away by one act of kindness, but he had saved a life. Maybe that was worth any price. "I am ready," he said. The news spread across Earth like wildfire. A homeless man had saved an alien princess. 300 alien soldiers had sworn to protect him. Every screen, every device, every news channel showed the story on repeat. They showed footage of Taiho being escorted from the warehouse, surrounded by Velhari guards. They interviewed people from the industrial district who claimed they knew him, though most had never spoken to him. Humanity was divided in its reaction. Some people celebrated Taiho as a hero, proof that humans could be noble and compassionate. They organized rallies supporting him, made signs calling him a symbol of hope. Others mocked him, calling him foolish for refusing the Velhari wealth. They said he had wasted a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and some were simply angry, resentful that aliens seemed to care more about one homeless man than Earth governments cared about millions living in poverty. Taiho watched some of the news coverage from inside the Velhari ship, where he was staying temporarily. Commander Darim had offered him quarters there while they figured out his security situation. The rooms were comfortable, too comfortable. The bed was too soft. The food was too plentiful. He felt out of place, like he was pretending to be someone he was not. On the third day, Earth's Planetary Council demanded a meeting. They sent official messages to the Velhari ships, insisting that Taiho be handed over for diplomatic debriefing. The council called him a person of strategic importance, a bridge between species, and claimed they needed to manage the situation properly. What they really wanted was control. Taiho represented a relationship with a powerful alien empire, and governments always wanted to control such things. Commander Darim refused their demands flatly. "Taiho is under our protection," she told the council representatives through a video link. "He is guardian of the blood, a member of our royal family by sacred oath. We do not surrender family to anyone. If you wish to speak with him, you may request an audience, but you do not command us and you do not command him." The council was furious, but they could do nothing. The Velhari ships had weapons that could level cities. More importantly, the Velhari had the moral high ground. They had come in peace to honor a debt. Attacking them would make Earth look barbaric. The council had to back down, though they made it clear they would be watching Taiho closely. The attention was crushing. Taiho had spent 2 years trying to be invisible, and now the entire planet was looking at him. He could not go outside without crowds gathering. He could not sleep without worrying about what would come next. One evening, alone in his quarters, he finally broke down. Commander Darim found him sitting on the floor, his head in his hands, tears running down his face. She dismissed the guards outside and entered quietly, sitting down beside him. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Taiho found his voice. "I am nobody," he whispered. "I am a failed father who could not save his own daughter. I am a homeless man who lived in garbage and ate scraps. I do not deserve this attention. I do not deserve to be called a hero. Darim listened without interrupting. When he finished, she spoke softly. You judge yourself by what you could not control. We judge you by what you chose when you had a choice. Your daughter's death was not your failure. Disease and debt are not moral failures. They are tragedies. She turned to look at him directly. But that night in the snow you had a choice. You could have walked away. You could have taken the princess's device and called for help without giving up your blanket. You could have done the minimum. Instead, you gave everything. You chose compassion over survival. That is why you are a hero. Taiho wiped his eyes. I just did what felt right. Exactly, Darim said. You did not think about reward or recognition. You saw suffering and ended it at great cost to yourself. Do you know how rare that is? In all my years serving the royal family, I have seen thousands of acts of bravery, but true selflessness, the kind you showed, is precious and uncommon. They sat in silence for a while longer. Finally, Taiho spoke again. What happens now? I cannot live on this ship forever. I cannot hide from the world, but I do not know what to do. Darim considered this. What do you want to do? Taiho thought about it. He thought about the warehouse, about the other homeless people he knew, about the families living in the ruins. He thought about his daughter, about the medical bills that destroyed his life, about all the people trapped in systems that cared more about money than lives. I want to help, he said slowly, not just one person. I want to help everyone who is cold, who is hungry, who has been forgotten. If the Velhari really want to honor me, if you really want to repay this debt, that is what I ask. Help the people who need it. Build shelters. Provide food and medical care. Give people a chance. Darim stared at him. You could ask for wealth beyond measure, power, anything in the galaxy, and you ask for us to help strangers? They are not strangers to me, Taiho said. They are my neighbors, my community. If honoring me means anything, let it mean helping them. A slow smile spread across Darim's face. Guardian, you continue to surprise me. Very well. I will take your request to the Emperor. But I believe he will agree. This is exactly the kind of thing that honors our culture. 2 days later, the announcement came. The Velhari Dominion would establish humanitarian centers across Earth's poorest regions. They would provide shelter, food, medical care, and job training to anyone who needed it. The centers would be staffed by Velhari volunteers and funded by the Dominion. And overseeing the entire operation would be Taiho, ensuring the help reached the people who needed it most. The response was mixed. Many people were grateful and excited, but the wealthy elite were furious. They saw the Velhari aid as interference, as a criticism of how Earth was run. Several governments demanded the aliens leave, claiming their sovereignty was being violated. Underground groups began plotting, seeing Taiho as a symbol of alien invasion. But the construction began anyway. In the industrial district where Taiho had lived, the first humanitarian center rose from the ruins. It was a beautiful building, warm and welcoming, with beds for hundreds and kitchens that could feed thousands. The Velhari worked alongside human volunteers, building something good from nothing. Taiho spent his days at the center, greeting people, listening to their stories, making sure everyone was treated with dignity. Princess Narai visited often, bringing gifts and playing with the children who came for help. The 300 Velhari guards rotated shifts protecting the center and Taiho, but they also helped with the work, serving food and carrying supplies. One evening, an old woman approached Taiho. She was thin and tired, wearing layers of torn clothing. She looked like he had looked just weeks ago. Is it true? She asked. Is the food really free? The bed's really free? Yes, Taiho said gently. No cost, no questions. Just help when you need it. The woman started crying. I have not slept in a real bed in 3 years. I thought I would die in the cold. Taiho took her hand. Not tonight. Tonight you are warm and safe. Come, let me show you to a bed. As he helped the woman inside, Commander Darim watched from nearby. She saw how gently Taiho treated everyone, how he remembered what it was like to have nothing. She thought about how he had refused everything for himself but asked for everything for others. Later, she spoke to him privately. You know this will make you enemies. The powerful do not like being shown as uncaring. There are people who will want to stop this. Taiho nodded. I know, but it is worth the risk. Every person we help, every life we make better, that is worth any danger. Darum placed a hand on his shoulder. Then we will stand with you, all 300 of us in the entire might of the Velhari Dominion. You gave everything for one child. We will give everything to protect your dream. That night, Taiho stood outside the humanitarian center and looked at the lights in the windows. Inside were hundreds of people who had been cold, hungry, and forgotten. Now they were warm, fed, and cared for. It was not enough. There were millions more who needed help. But it was a start. He thought about that frozen night, about a small alien child shivering in the snow. One small act of kindness had created all this. He wondered what else might be possible if people simply chose to care. The humanitarian centers multiplied across Earth. Within 3 months, 20 centers operated in different cities, helping thousands of people every day. The Velhari kept their promise, pouring resources into the project. But not everyone was happy about this change. In the shadows, powerful people met in secret. Corporate executives who profited from cheap, desperate labor. Politicians who used poverty to control voting populations. Crime bosses who recruited from the homeless. They all saw the Velhari aid as a threat to their power. If people had food and shelter without strings attached, they were harder to exploit. These groups began working together. They hired mercenaries, both human and alien. They spread false information through social media, claiming the Velhari were secretly enslaving people in the centers. They paid protesters to cause trouble at the center openings. But their real plan was darker. Detective Minji was investigating these activities. She was a 30-year-old investigator with the Planetary Security Force, tough and smart. She had initially distrusted the Velhari, seeing them as foreign interference. But after visiting the humanitarian centers and seeing the genuine good being done, her opinion changed. She began tracking the conspiracy against Taiho. Her investigation uncovered disturbing information. Money was moving through shell companies. Weapons were being smuggled. Mercenaries from a species called the Kolvari were arriving on Earth. The Kolvari were known as brutal fighters who worked for whoever paid them. Something big was being planned. Minji brought her findings to Commander Darim. The two women met in the Velhari ship, studying data on holographic displays. "This is serious," Minji said, pointing to financial transfers. "Someone is planning an attack, probably on one of the centers. Maybe on Taiho himself." Darim's expression was grim. "We have also detected unusual activity. Our security systems show multiple groups conducting surveillance on Guardian Taiho. We have increased his protection, but we cannot be everywhere." "Why target him?" Minji wondered aloud. "He is just one man trying to help people." "Exactly," Darim replied. "He is a symbol. If they kill him, they kill hope. They show that compassion is weakness. They prove that the powerful cannot be challenged. They decided to set a trap. A public ceremony was planned at the newest humanitarian center. Taiho would speak, along with Princess Narai, who insisted on attending despite the danger. Security would be tight, but not so tight that the attackers would be scared off. They would let the enemy make their move, then capture them all at once. The day of the ceremony arrived. The new center was in the capital city, a gleaming building that stood in stark contrast to the surrounding slums. Thousands of people gathered for the opening. Media drones filled the air. Politicians who had opposed the centers now showed up for photo opportunities, pretending they had supported the idea all along. Taiho stood on the stage, uncomfortable in the nice clothes the Velhari had given him. He hated speeches, hated attention, but he had learned that his words mattered now. People listened to him. He could inspire them to care about each other. Princess Narai stood beside him, wearing a pretty dress and waving to the crowd. She was 8 years old now by Velhari aging, and she loved humans. She had learned to speak Korean fluently, and spent her time on Earth playing with children at the centers. Despite all security warnings, she had refused to miss this ceremony. Taiho began his speech. He talked about his time living on the streets, about the cold and hunger and fear. He talked about how one small act of kindness had changed his life and created all of this. He asked people to remember that everyone they saw, rich or poor, was a person worthy of dignity. The crowd was silent, listening. Some people cried, others nodded in agreement. It was a good moment, a moment of connection. Then everything went wrong. The attack came from 3 directions at once. Mercenaries in the crowd pulled out weapons. A vehicle loaded with explosives crashed through the security barrier. Snipers on surrounding buildings opened fire. The attackers were professional and coordinated. Their target was clear: kill Taiho and the princess. The Velhari response was instant and overwhelming. The 300 guards who surrounded the area moved with incredible speed. Energy shields appeared, blocking bullets and explosions. Return fire was precise, targeting weapons without killing the attackers. Within seconds, the ceremonial grounds became a battlefield. Commander Darim appeared beside Taiho, her armor activated and weapon ready. She grabbed both him and Narai, pulling them down behind a shield barrier. "Stay down," she ordered. Around them, chaos erupted. People screamed and ran. Some Velhari guards protected the civilians. Others engaged the attackers. But the mercenaries had planned well. They had studied Velhari tactics. Kolvari warriors in heavy armor pushed through the shields, fighting hand-to-hand with the guards. Explosions rocked the building. For a terrible moment, it looked like the attackers might succeed. Then Detective Minji made her move. She had positioned security forces around the perimeter, waiting for this exact scenario. Police in combat gear moved in, cutting off escape routes. Human soldiers worked alongside Velhari warriors, surrounding the mercenaries. The trap closed. The battle lasted only minutes, but it felt longer. When the smoke cleared, 30 attackers lay stunned or captured. Several Velhari guards were injured but alive. 3 human bystanders had been hurt in the crossfire, but medics were already treating them. And Taiho and Narai were safe, shaken but unharmed. The investigation moved quickly. The captured mercenaries were questioned. Detective Minji traced the money and communications. Within days, the conspiracy was exposed. 3 Earth corporations, 5 politicians, 2 crime syndicates, and a Kolvari weapons dealer had all worked together to plan the attack. Their goal had been simple: kill Taiho and the princess, blame it on Velhari incompetence, and force the humanitarian centers to close. They would have gotten away with it if not for the coordination between Minji and Darim. The arrests were public and humiliating. Politicians were led away in handcuffs. Corporate executives tried to flee but were caught. The crime bosses went into hiding, but the Velhari tracked them down. The message was clear. Attacking Taiho meant attacking the Velhari Dominion, and they did not forgive such insults. But the event had consequences. Princess Narai had nearly died again, this time because she wanted to help humans. The Emperor of the Velhari Dominion was furious. He sent a message to Earth's government that was broadcast publicly. His face appeared on every screen, stern and angry. "We came to your world in peace," the Emperor said. "We came to honor a debt and help your people. In return, your corrupt leaders tried to murder our princess and the man we honor. This will not be forgotten. We will continue our humanitarian work, but know this: Princess Narai is precious to us. The Guardian Taiho is precious to us. Any who threaten them threaten the Dominion. Choose wisely." The threat was clear. Earth's government scrambled to apologize, to distance themselves from the conspirators. But the damage was done. The Velhari saw clearly now what Taiho had seen all along. The systems that created poverty were deliberate, maintained by those who profited from suffering. After the attack, Taiho visited the injured bystanders in the hospital. He held their hands and apologized, though it was not his fault. He promised that the centers would continue, would expand, would help even more people. The injured people thanked him, said he was worth fighting for. That night, Taiho sat with Commander Darim and Detective Minji in a secure room. They reviewed the security footage, identifying weaknesses, planning better protection. But Taiho was thinking about something else. "I will not hide," he said suddenly. "I will not stop appearing at the centers. The people need to see that I am still here, still fighting for them. If I hide, the attackers win." Minji shook her head. "That is too dangerous. They will try again." "Let them," Taiho said firmly. "Every attempt they make shows their fear. They are afraid of compassion. They are afraid of people having hope. I will not let them use fear to stop us." Darim studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled, the fierce smile of a warrior who had found a worthy cause. "Then we guard you even closer. All 300 of us. Every moment. Let them come. They will not succeed." Princess Nari entered the room then, escorted by her personal guards. She ran to Taiho and hugged him. "Uncle Taiho safe," she said happily, then more seriously. "Bad people tried to hurt us. But we are strong. We help people anyway." Taiho looked at the young princess, at her determination and courage. She had almost died twice now, once in the snow and once from assassins. but she refused to give up on helping others. If a child could be that brave, how could he be less? Yes, he agreed. We help people anyway. 6 months after the assassination attempt, an invitation arrived. The Emperor of the Velhari Dominion formally requested Taiho's presence on the homeworld of Velhara. It was a great honor, Commander Darum explained. Humans had visited Velhara before, diplomats and scientists, but never someone honored as family. The ceremony would be public, broadcast across dozens of worlds. Taiho did not want to go. He had work to do on Earth. The humanitarian centers needed him. People depended on seeing him there, proof that the project continued. But Princess Narai begged him. She wanted to show him her home, the world he had saved her for. And Commander Darum pointed out that his presence on Velhara would strengthen the alliance, making it harder for Earth's corrupt leaders to interfere with the centers. Finally, Taiho agreed. He would go, but not alone. Detective Minji would come with him, as would representatives from the humanitarian centers and several humans who had been helped by the program. The Velhari wanted to honor one man, but Taiho insisted they honor the cause instead. The journey took 3 weeks, even in Velhari ships that could cross incredible distances. Taiho spent the time learning about Velhari culture from Darum and the guards. They taught him their language, their customs, their history. He learned that Velhari society was built on concepts of honor and sacrifice. Warriors were respected, yes, but so were teachers, artists, and anyone who served others. The guards, whom Taiho had come to know well over the months, shared their personal stories during the journey. One guard named Bora talked about losing his family to a plague and dedicating his life to protecting others. Another Soman spoke of growing up poor on a colony world and joining the military to make a difference. Taiho realized these soldiers understood him because they had their own stories of loss and service. Detective Minji spent the journey investigating Velhari law and justice systems. She was impressed by how much they prioritized fairness over profit. Prisons focused on rehabilitation, not punishment. Healthcare was free and excellent. Education was considered a right, not a privilege. She started taking notes, thinking about what Earth could learn from these systems. When they finally emerged from faster-than-light travel and approached Velhara, Taiho pressed his face to the observation window in wonder. The planet was beautiful. 2 moons hung in the sky. The continents were green and blue, covered in forests and oceans. Cities glittered like jewels, but even from space he could see they were built around nature, not instead of it. The ship descended toward the capital city, Nalara. It was stunning. Buildings rose like crystals, catching the light and throwing rainbows across the streets. Gardens and trees filled every space. Waterways ran through the city, clean and full of life. Millions of Velhari lived here, but the city felt peaceful rather than crowded. At the spaceport, a massive crowd waited. Tens of thousands of Velhari had come to see the human who saved their princess. They held signs in Korean and Velhari, thanking Taiho. When he emerged from the ship, still wearing simple clothes despite offers of fancy robes, the crowd erupted in cheers. Princess Narai grabbed his hand and pulled him forward, laughing.
Welcome to my home,
she said happily. She looked different here, more relaxed, surrounded by her own people, but she still stuck close to Taiho, her adopted uncle. The next days were a blur of activities. Taiho was given tours of the city, met with various officials, and visited schools where children had learned his story. What moved him most were the ordinary Velhari who approached him quietly, sharing their own stories of kindness they had witnessed or performed. His story had inspired them to be better, to help more, to think of others first. One elderly Velhari woman approached him in a garden. She bowed deeply, then spoke through a translator. I was a teacher for 60 years. I taught millions of children. But your story taught me something new. You had nothing and gave everything. I had much and gave little. You shamed me into being better. Thank you, Taiho did not know what to say. He had never meant to shame anyone. But the woman smiled and touched his hand gently. Sometimes we need reminders of what truly matters. You reminded me. Now I volunteer at centers for orphaned children. Your act of compassion echoes across the galaxy. The formal ceremony was scheduled for the end of his visit. It would take place in the Grand Hall of Memory, the most sacred place in Velhari culture. The hall was enormous, capable of holding 100,000 people. The walls were covered in names, every Velhari who had died in service to others. Warriors, yes, but also doctors who died fighting plagues, engineers who died building colonies, teachers who died protecting students. On the day of the ceremony, Tejo was dressed in formal robes, a blend of Velhari and human styles. He walked into the hall surrounded by his 300 guards with Princess Narai holding his hand. The hall was packed, every seat filled, every balcony crowded. Cameras broadcast to billions across dozens of worlds. At the front of the hall, on a raised platform, sat the Emperor. Hansong was ancient, over 200 years old, but his eyes were sharp and kind. He wore simple robes despite his rank, and he stood when Tejo approached, which shocked everyone. Emperors did not stand for anyone. Commander Darim led Tejo to kneel before the Emperor, but Hansong gestured for him to stand instead. "I do not require kneeling from family," the Emperor said in perfect Korean, which he had learned for this moment. His voice was deep and warm, broadcast throughout the hall. The ceremony began with recitations of Velhari history, stories of great sacrifices and noble acts. Then the Emperor spoke about Tejo. He told the story of the frozen night, of the blanket, of the choice to give everything to save a child. His words were simple but powerful. "We honor warriors who fight enemies," Hansong said. "We honor scientists who cure diseases. We honor leaders who guide nations. But this human Tejo we honor for something even greater. He fought his own survival instinct. He cured his own selfishness. He led by example when no one watched. This is the highest form of courage." The Emperor approached Tejo and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Tejo, guardian of the blood, I ask you now before all these witnesses, why did you do it? Why give your only protection to a stranger?" It was the question everyone asked. Tejo had answered it many times, but never before so many people. He thought about his answer carefully, knowing his words would be heard across the galaxy. Finally he spoke, his voice quiet but clear. She was cold. She was afraid. She was a child who needed help. He paused, then continued. "I lost my daughter years ago. I could not save her. But I could save one child even if she was not human. What else could I do? How could I live with myself if I walked away?" The silence in the hall was absolute. 100,000 Velhari held their breath. Then the Emperor spoke again, and his voice was thick with emotion. "What else could you do?" he repeated. "You make it sound so simple. But millions of beings across the galaxy face such choices every day. Most choose comfort over compassion. Most choose safety over sacrifice. You chose differently, and it cost you everything. That is why we honor you." The Emperor raised his voice to address the entire hall. "Let it be recorded in the Hall of Memory. Tejo of Earth, guardian of the blood, honorary member of the royal family, is granted the Star of Compassion, our highest civilian honor. Let his name be remembered alongside our greatest heroes. Let his example inspire billions yet unborn." The crowd rose to their feet as one, applauding. The sound was like thunder. Tejo felt tears on his face and did not try to hide them. He thought of Sumi, of how proud she would have been. He thought of all the people he had met in the humanitarian centers, all the lives touched by one simple choice. Princess Narai hugged him tightly. "I am proud to be your family," she whispered. That night there was a banquet with thousands of guests. Tejo sat at the high table between the Emperor and the Princess. He was exhausted by the attention but grateful for the honor. Detective Minji sat nearby, looking uncomfortable in formal dress but clearly moved by the ceremony. The Emperor spoke to Tejo privately during the meal. "You know," Hansong said quietly, "we have a saying in Velhari culture. The measure of a being is taken when no one measures. You were measured that night in the snow alone with a choice. And you were found to be noble beyond words." Tejo shook his head. "I just did what felt right." "Exactly," the Emperor smiled. "Nobility is not thinking about being noble. It is simply being noble when the moment requires it. You have taught the galaxy a valuable lesson. Power and wealth do not make someone great. Character does. Compassion does. The willingness to sacrifice for a stranger does." He raised his glass in a toast. "To Tejo, who reminded us all what we should aspire to be." The entire banquet hall raised their glasses. "To Tejo," thousands of voices echoed. Later, standing on a balcony overlooking the glittering city, Tejo talked with Minji. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked. "When you were sleeping in that warehouse?" "Never," Tejo admitted. "I thought I would die there eventually, alone and forgotten." "You are not forgotten now," Minji said. "Your story will outlive all of us." Tejo looked up at the alien stars, thinking about Earth and all the work still to do. Stories are good, but I hope the story inspires action. I hope people help each other, not because someone is watching, but because it is right. They will, Minji said confidently. You have start 1 year after that frozen night. Taiho stood in the ruins of the old industrial district where his life had changed. The area looked different now. The abandoned warehouses had been demolished. In their place stood a beautiful humanitarian center, the largest on Earth. A garden surrounded it where people could sit in peace. A memorial wall listed the names of every homeless person who had died on the streets in the past decade. Sumi's name was there too, among the thousands. Taiho had returned to Earth 6 months ago after his time on Velhara. He had been offered a mansion, a position in government, wealth beyond measure. He refused it all. Instead, he took a small apartment near the humanitarian center and worked there every day, helping the people who came through its doors. His life was simple again, but this time he was not alone. The 300 Velhari guards still protected him, rotating shifts and living in quarters built near the center. They had become part of the community, learning human languages and customs, helping with everything from serving food to teaching self-defense classes. The local children loved them, playing with the tall alien soldiers during their off-duty hours. Commander Darim had become one of Taiho's closest friends. She visited him every morning with tea, a human custom she had learned to love. They would sit in his small apartment and talk about the day's plans, about the people they had helped, about the challenges still ahead. Darim had changed too. She smiled more now, laughed at human jokes, and had learned to make Korean food, though she admitted she was terrible at it. Detective Minji had left the Planetary Security Force to become the director of security for all the humanitarian centers. She worked closely with both human and Velhari teams, building a new model of cooperation. She and Taiho had become partners in running the Blanket Foundation, the official name of the humanitarian network. The name was Taiho's idea, a reminder that sometimes the smallest gift could change everything. The foundation had grown beyond anyone's expectations. 80 centers now operated across Earth, helping hundreds of thousands of people every month. But more importantly, the idea had spread. Other alien species, inspired by the Velhari example, had started their own humanitarian programs on their worlds. 6 different species had sent representatives to Earth to learn from Taiho's work. Earth itself had changed, slowly but noticeably. Governments had been pressured by their citizens to increase social programs. The corporations that had profited from poverty faced boycotts and protests. It was not a revolution, but it was progress. People had seen that another way was possible, and they demanded it. Princess Narai visited Earth every few months. She was growing quickly, already looking like a teenager, though only a year had passed. She spent her visits working at the centers, serving food, talking to people, learning about human struggles. The Emperor had approved her spending time on Earth as part of her education. He believed that future rulers should understand compassion, not just politics. On the anniversary of the frozen night, a special ceremony was planned at the center. But unlike the formal ceremony on Velhara, this one was simple. Just the people from the community, the volunteers and the families who had been helped. No cameras, no politicians, no grand speeches, just people coming together to remember and celebrate. Taiho stood before the gathering, uncomfortable as always with attention. But these were his people, the ones who understood because they had lived it. He spoke from his heart. 1 year ago, I was dying in the snow. I had nothing left to lose. I found a child who needed help, and I helped her. I did not know she was a princess. I did not know it would lead to all this. He gestured around at the center, at the people. I just knew she was cold and scared, and I could do something about it. He paused, looking at the faces watching him. Some were people he had pulled from the streets himself. Others were volunteers who had given their time. All of them were proof that compassion was contagious. What I have learned this year is that everyone has a blanket to give. Not literally, but something. Time, kindness, a listening ear, a helping hand. We all have something we can share with those who need it. And when we do, when we give without expecting anything back, we change the world. Not all at once, not dramatically, but person by person, choice by choice. A young girl in the front row raised her hand. She was maybe 9 years old, living at the center with her mother. Mr. Taiho, do you regret it? Giving away your blanket? Taiho smiled at her. Never, not for a second. That blanket kept me warm for years, but using it to save a life, that made it matter. That gave it purpose. After the ceremony, people mingled in the garden. Food was shared, stories were told, children played. Tejo watched it all, feeling something he had not felt in years. Peace. Not happiness exactly, because he still carried the grief of losing Sumi. But peace with his place in the world, with what he had done and what he would continue doing. A young man approached him, nervous and thin. Tejo recognized him as someone who had arrived at the center just days ago, half-starved and desperate. "Sir," the young man said quietly, "I wanted to thank you. Before I came here, I was planning to end things. I could not see a way forward. But then I heard about this place, about your story, and I thought if someone cared enough to build this, maybe life was worth trying again." Tejo gripped the young man's shoulder. "I am glad you came. I'm glad you are still here. The world needs you, even if you do not believe that yet." The young man nodded, tears in his eyes, and walked away. Moments like that made everything worthwhile. One life saved, one person given hope. It was not dramatic or grand, but it mattered infinitely to that one person. As evening fell, Tejo walked to the memorial wall. He found Sumi's name and traced it with his fingers. "I hope I made you proud," he whispered. "I hope you would have done the same thing. I miss you every day, but I am trying to honor your memory by helping others." "She would be proud," a voice said behind him. Commander Darum stood there, her armor gleaming in the fading light. "Any parent would be proud of what you have become." "I am just doing what I can," Tejo said. "That is all any of us can do," Darum replied. "But you showed us that what we can is often more than we think. You had nothing and gave everything. Now millions have something because of that choice." They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Then Darum spoke again. "The Emperor sent a message. More species want to join the Humanitarian Alliance. They are calling it the Tejo Accord, an agreement between worlds to prioritize compassion and service." Tejo shook his head. "They should not name it after me. I do not want that." "Too late," Darum said with a smile. "You are a symbol now, whether you want it or not. But symbols are important. They remind people of what matters." That night, after everyone had gone home, Tejo made his final rounds of the center. He checked on the sleeping areas, making sure everyone had blankets and the heat was working properly. He stopped by the children's room and adjusted a blanket on a sleeping child, making sure the little girl was warm. The simple act reminded him of that frozen night. One blanket, one child, one choice, and everything had flowed from that. He realized now that this was his purpose. Not the ceremonies or the honors or the recognition, just this, making sure people were warm and safe and cared for. He stepped outside into the cold night air. Snow was falling gently, covering the city in white. But unlike a year ago, Tejo was not afraid of the cold. He had a warm apartment to return to. He had friends. He had purpose. Most importantly, he had the knowledge that his life meant something. A small figure appeared beside him. Princess Narai had stayed on Earth for the anniversary and was supposed to be asleep in the guest quarters. But here she was, wrapped in a blanket, watching the snow. "Could not sleep," she said simply, "thinking about that night. When you saved me." "I think about it too," Tejo admitted. "Do you know what I remember most?" Narai asked. "Not the cold or the fear. I remember your eyes. You looked at me like I mattered, like my life was worth saving even though you did not know me. No one had ever looked at me like that before." "Every life matters," Tejo said. "Yours, mine, everyone in this center. That is what I want people to understand." Narai nodded and leaned against him. "Uncle Tejo, what will you do now? You have built all this. Where do you go from here?" Tejo thought about the question. He looked at the center, at the lights in the windows, at the smoke rising from the heating vents. He thought about all the other centers across Earth and starting on other worlds. He thought about the ripples of compassion spreading outward, touching lives he would never meet. "I keep going," he said simply. "There are still people who need help. Still children who are cold and scared. As long as I am breathing, I will do what I can." "That is a good answer," Narai said. She pulled her blanket tighter and smiled. "I will help too. When I am Empress someday, I will make sure the Dominion never forgets what you taught us." They stood together in the falling snow, watching over the center. Inside, hundreds of people slept safely, people who might have frozen or starved without this place. Each one was a life saved, a choice honored, a ripple of that one frozen.